Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture about sonnet. In this presentation, we'll be learning about what is a sonnet and what are the different types of sonnets and what are the criteria for a poem to be qualified. It can be called as a sonnet. Okay, so let's see. So sonnet is a 14-line poem which follows iambic pentameter strictly and proper rhyme scheme. So that will make a sonnet a different or a difficult form of poetry for writers to kind of like achieve, because a conscious effort from the side of the poet is required to get a poem to be qualified as a sonnet. So a little bit about the origin of the sonnet. It requires, as I said, it requires a great technical skill to write, therefore has challenged English poets since its introduction almost 500 years ago. So sonnet as a form of poetry originated in Italy in the 13th century. So there are like different people who are called as like come up with the form of sonnet, but it is usually we acknowledge the writer Petrarch, Italian writer Petrarch, to perfect or to popularize the form of sonnet in Italy. And in 1530s, Sir Thomas Wyatt and Surrey. So Wyatt was a poet and diplomat in Henry VIII's court. He translated some of Petrarch's love sonnets and wrote a few modified sonnets of his own. So later, King Henry VIII encouraged the poetry of courtly love and welcomed the sonnet as a poetry form in England as well. So that's how sonnet is a form of poetry borrowed from Italian literature and introduced to English literature. So Wyatt and Surrey are the people who are like usually we recognize as the people who introduced sonnet as a form of poetry in English literature. So there are basically two major types of sonnets, Italian or Petrarchan sonnet, English or Shakespearean sonnet. And for English sonnet, there is a variant or variety, which is Spenserian sonnet, a little difference in the rhyme scheme. Because of that, it is named as Spenserian sonnet, and it was popularized by, as you all know, Edmund Spenser. From the name, it is pretty much clear. Yes. So what is Italian or Petrarchan sonnet? So basically, the difference lies in the stanzaic form. So Italian sonnet or Petrarchan sonnet is divided into two stanzas, right? So the two stanzaic forms are octave and a sestet. So if you're familiar with stanzaic forms, you know octave is an 8-line stanza and sestet is a 6-line stanza. So combining the both 8-line stanza and 6-line stanza, or an octave and a sestet, will get 14-line poem, which we call as a Italian or Petrarchan sonnet. And basically, themes are usually the hopes and pains of an adoring male lover, and it was introduced in early 16th century in English literature by Thomas Wyatt. And the famous practitioners of Italian sonnet in English literature include John Milton, William Wordsworth, and Rossetti's siblings, KDG Rossetti and Christina Rossetti. So as you can see right on the screen, this is an example for Italian or Petrarchan sonnet written by William Wordsworth, the famous romantic poet, titled London 1802. So as you can see, the first 8 lines, it introduces the theme or problem. Okay. And if you notice, you can also see the rhyme scheme is also mentioned there. R, fen, pen, bar, dar, men, again, bar. So the followed rhyme scheme for the octave is A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A, right? And it introduces the theme or problem. And the following sestet, it is solving the problem. Or generally, a theme will be introduced on a general level in the octave, and which will be expanded, or which, if any problem is being addressed, it will be solved in the second stanza, which will be a sestet. So an Italian sonnet or a Petrarchan sonnet, if we want to call a sonnet as Italian or Petrarchan, the stanzaic division should be an octave and a sestet following the rhyme scheme A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A, and C, D, E, C, D, E. So that is the kind of stanzaic form. Slight variations can be possible, but mostly this will be the rhyme scheme and stanzaic division followed by Italian sonnet. Okay, so just to repeat, Italian sonnet or Petrarchan sonnet. It originated from Italy, practiced and perfected, popularized by Italian writer Petrarch. It was borrowed, this form of poetry was borrowed by Sir Thomas Wyatt and introduced in English literature in 16th century. And famous practitioners include Wordsworth, Milton, Rossetti's siblings, and Sir Thomas Wyatt himself. And they follow this stanzaic form of octave combined with a sestet, which will make a 14-lined poem, a sonnet. And the themes will usually be courtly love, and that's the form of Italian sonnet. Coming to English or Shakespearean sonnet, most of the English major students are familiar with Shakespearean sonnets because maybe they are familiar with it from their school curriculum or even in graduate degree programs. Shakespearean sonnets are like a major part of the curriculum. So English or Shakespearean sonnet, it again introduced by Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey. He popularized or he changed the kind of stanzaic form and the rhyme scheme to adapt to the English audience, and but it was popularized by William Shakespeare, and that's why the name is given as Shakespearean sonnet. Okay, so it was introduced in 16th century in English literature by Earl of Surrey, Henry Howard. And what is this stanzaic division here? Again, 14-line stanza, 14-line poem, sonnet, but there will be like two different stanzaic form, quatrains and a couplet. So quatrain is a 4-line stanza and couplet is a 2-line stanza. So here we have three different quatrains which will make 12 lines along with a couplet. And it will follow the rhyme scheme, usually A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Okay, so as you can see, AB will be making one quatrain, first quatrain, CD, CD, second quatrain, EF, third quatrain, and concluding couplet follow the rhyme scheme GG. Okay, and famous practitioners include John Donne, William Wordsworth, John Keats, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Rossetti siblings, Christina Rossetti and D.G. Rossetti, Edwin Arlington Robinson, W.B. Yeats, Robert Frost, W.H. Auden, and Dylan Thomas. As you can see on the screen, there are like a lot of practitioners who popularized, who tried their hands on Shakespearean sonnet, because this was one way. Sonnet has got this like a wonderful way in which writers could introduce a theme, problematize, solve that problem within that 14 line. So it shows the skill, a great technical skill and rhythmic skill and thematic skill from the side of poet. So it has always been a challenge to writers to achieve that sort of like to write a sonnet, right? So Shakespearean sonnet or English sonnet, as you can see, it follows the stanzaic form of quatrain and sonnet, and quatrain and couplet. And how many quatrains are there? 3 quatrains, which will make 12 lines, and it will end with a couplet, which is a 2-line stanza. So Shakespearean sonnet is also known as English sonnets, consists of 14 lines written in iambic pentameter. So what is iambic pentameter? Those who are not familiar with the meter. So iambic pentameter will be like unstressed syllable followed by stressed syllable, and pentameter will give the idea that it is repeated 5 times. So that will make iambic pentameter. So first quatrain, second quatrain, and third quatrain ends with a final couplet. It's again rhyming, and that's why the scheme GG. So the end of the third quatrain, first stanza 4 lines, second stanza 4 lines, third stanza 4 lines, and the end of that third stanza will be kind of like a twist. It will introduce, or it will kind of like, it will invite the reader to kind of like conclude, or to invite the reader to the solution to the problem, and that is known as volta. And the rhyming couplet is often a summary of the poet's idea, but with a subtle change in thought. So that change in thought will be introduced by the end of the third quatrain, third stanza, which we call as a volta. So, as you can see on the screen, is a sample Shakespearean sonnet is Sonnet 18, a very famous sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And you can see the different stanzaic divisions ended with a couplet. So, the first few lines reflect on the theme of its writings, but the last two lines or the couplet will be the conclusion. And coming to the variant within English sonnet. So remember, we have Italian sonnet, which we call as Petrarchan sonnet. English sonnet is again divided into Shakespearean and Spenserian. So Spenserian sonnet, as the name suggests itself, was popularized by the writer Edmund Spenser and is named after the Renaissance poet Edmund Spenser. So Spenser's Amority is a sequence of 89 sonnets which record a man's 2-year courtship of a woman named Elizabeth. So Spenser kept the division and organization of the standard Shakespearean or English sonnet, but he changed the rhyme scheme. So that's why together, like Shakespearean and Spenserian sonnets are known as English sonnets, because both of them follow the same stanzaic division. Both of them follow the 3 quatrains followed by a couplet stanzaic division, but the rhyme scheme is something which is varied in both the sonnets. So here, what we can see, a sound will repeat in the second stanza, which means A B A B C D, sorry, A B A B B C B C C D C D E E. As you can see, A B in the first quatrain, the B sound, the rhyming sound B form is being repeated in the second quatrain, and the C sound from the second quatrain is being repeated in the third quatrain, and is a completely different scheme for the couplet. But if you remember, Shakespearean sonnet, it was A B C D E F G G. Okay, so there is no repetitions happening in Shakespearean sonnet, but here one sound is being repeated, one rhyme is being repeated in the forthcoming quatrain, and that variant will make Spenserian sonnet. So only difference what you can remember is that the difference in rhyme scheme, nothing else. So the themes are also like quite common, like love, courtship, and as you can see, amority is a what we'll come to learn in the coming slides is a sonnet cycle, because it is a combination of 89 sonnets in the Spenserian format, and that is a sonnet cycle. So here what we can understand is that the difference is only in the rhyme scheme. So here is what we call as a sonnet sequence or a sonnet cycle. So what is a sonnet sequence? It is a group of sonnets thematically unified to create a long work, although generally unlike the stanza, each sonnet so connected can also be read as a meaningful separate unit. So what is very unique or what is very characteristic of a sonnet sequence or a sonnet cycle is that it will be a group of sonnet, which means each of these sonnets can be read as like a long work, as kind of like an epic or kind of like a large poem. But at the same time, if we remove each of these sonnets, we can also read it as a different, completely different. It will make sense within itself, which means a 14 line from one whole sonnet sequence will again make a meaning, which will again give an idea to the reader, because each of these are different Spenserian sonnet, but together when it combined, it will be like a long work which is thematically unified. So Shakespeare's sonnets, Sidney's Astrophel and Stella, Spenser's Amority, Wordsworth's The River Dutton, D.G. Rossiti's Alterwise by All Light are meditations on the poet life, Alterwise, and George Meredith's Modern Love talks about the theme of bitterly unhappy marriage. So it's a long theme being dealt with in detail, the entire sonnet cycle or sonnet sequence. So the number can be anything, okay, 50 or 15 or 20, or so these many sonnets will be combined together. But remember, at the same time, if we remove one particular 14-line sonnet from out of the sonnet cycle, sonnet sequence, it will again give an idea, or it will again make sense, or it will again gives away the meaning or an idea about the theme to the reader specifically. So that will make sonnet cycle or sonnet sequence. So to conclude, we'll just brief about the general idea. So basically, sonnet is a 14-line poem. So what is the criteria? There is a stanzaic division, following iambic pentameter and a rhyme scheme, right? So the division is like this. We have Italian sonnet and English sonnet. Within Italian sonnet, that is Petrarchan sonnet completely. And Petrarchan sonnet or Italian sonnet follows the stanzaic division of octave and a sestet. So octave is an 8-line stanza, sestet is a 6-line stanza. So it follows a rhyme scheme specifically. And coming to English sonnet has two variants, Shakespearean and Spenserian, named after the person, after the writer who popularized that form. So the first one is Shakespearean sonnet. Mostly we call Shakespearean sonnet as English sonnet. And Shakespearean sonnet follows quatrains and a couplet. So how many quatrains are there? 3 quatrains, which will make 12 lines, plus 2-lined stanza, that is a couplet, right? And it follows the rhyme scheme of AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. And what is the difference of Spenserian sonnet from a Shakespearean sonnet is that only difference is in the rhyme scheme, because as an English sonnet, Spenserian sonnet also follows the same stanzaic division, that is 3 quatrains plus 1 couplet, 14 lines. But the rhyme scheme will be different because each of those quatrain, one rhyme will get repeated in the second and third quatrain, ending with EE, that is a rhyme scheme of the couplet for Spenserian sonnet. And sonnet sequence or sonnet cycle is a group of sonnets. Okay, so many 14-lined sonnets will be combined together in a sonnet sequence or a sonnet cycle. But the idea or the uniqueness of the sonnet sequence is that if we read the sonnet sequence completely, like together the entire thing, it will make sense. But if we remove one sonnet out of it, again, it will also make meaning. So that is generally about sonnet. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you.